My name is Bruce Packett. I'm the Executive Director of the American Academy of HIV Medicine. And if you're not familiar with our organization, we're a member-based group of medical providers specializing in HIV care. We credential healthcare providers as HIV specialists and HIV pharmacists. We provide ongoing medical education and advocate for the HIV healthcare profession. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this fantastic presentation we have lined up called Am I a Risk Factor? Addressing Stigma, Social Determinants, and Interventions for the Transgender Community, which we originally presented to healthcare providers earlier this year as a CME webinar with Dr. Ogle as the lead faculty. This topic is not only incredibly relevant, but also close to our hearts here at the American Academy of HIV Medicine. And I want to mention too that this month we are launching the first course in our comprehensive sexual health curriculum for all healthcare providers. And there's a postcard in the back next to the sign-in sheet with more information that I'll hope you'll take with you. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty of gender-affirming care, I want to take a moment to appreciate the significance of the discussions we're about to have. Our understanding of HIV care and prevention has come a long way, and this presentation represents a giant leap forward in addressing the unique needs and challenges faced by the LGBTQ+ community, especially transgender and gender-diverse individuals. We couldn't be more thrilled to have you with us on our journey today. Gender-affirming care is a vital aspect of providing comprehensive, compassionate healthcare to all, regardless of their gender identity. And our speaker today is an expert in this field, Dr. Michelle Collins-Ogle. And Dr. Ogle is the medical director of the Montefiore Adolescent and Youth Sexual Health Clinic, where she provides comprehensive gender-affirming care to youth and adolescents, and is the vice chair of the board of the American Academy of HIV Medicine. And I'm really confident that you'll leave here with a wealth of knowledge and a newfound appreciation for the importance of inclusivity in healthcare. So let's buckle up and keep an open mind and get ready to explore how we can better serve our diverse patient population. Without further ado, here's Dr. Ogle. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. That's better. I know I feel like y'all too, because it's 8 o'clock, and for people that have a time difference, I feel you. But hopefully you'll enjoy this presentation and walk away thinking a little bit differently and speaking a little bit differently on how we talk about risk and various diverse groups, particularly transgender and non-binary kids and adults as well. And as you can see up on the screen, so my co-presenter who did this webinar with me, Renee Riopel, I wanted to give them full credit because they contributed a lot to the content of this presentation. So I wanted to give them full credit so you can see them as well. I can't take credit for all of it. They were very instrumental in making sure I had good. So for full disclosures, I have no disclosures, and I will not be discussing off-label use of medications used in gender-affirming care in this presentation. So the objectives today are to reimagine and explore a cultural conceptualization of gender, including why is it cutting off? Including Black and Indigenous people of color, and body-inclusive models of gender and how the medical model benefits from upholding the gender binary. Learn the role of trailblazing transgender pioneers in gaining equality for members of LGBTQIA community. Understand the social determinants of health. Why is it cutting off like this? Understand the social determinants of health that are more impactful in transgender and non-binary youth of color, their impact on risk for HIV, sexually transmitted infections, and how to improve sexual health and HIV outcomes. And to understand the 4 U's, which I'll talk about in this presentation, and the impact on transgender and non-binary youth of color and their ability to prioritize prevention therapies and improve PrEP initiation. So this slide is like my favorite. I always remind myself why I do the work that I do. For full disclosure, the kid up in the corner, on your left up in the corner, it was just a file photo. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. That is a stock photo I took, but the other 3 young ladies are young trans kids that I provided care for several years ago, and they remind me why I do this work. They're the happiest, most productive young people that I know, so they remind me why I do this work. And of course, if you need to find a reason to love Don Cheadle more, on Saturday Night Live when he wore this shirt, I lost my mind. So First, I want to talk about the binary system and why we have it in the first place. And the binary system creates some having power over others. Medicine and the medical field has the power to determine what is sick or healthy, normal or pathological, sane or insane, and to turn human differences into oppressive social hierarchies. I love this statement by Susan Stryker, who is a historian, for people who don't know her. She's a transgender woman, a historian, and academician, and she's written a lot of books and talks a lot about the binary system and how it causes oppression and how men in particularly like to continue to use the binary system to have oppression over others. And the gender binary serves to control everyone, not just some, but it serves to control everyone. And who's familiar with the 3-article law? So the 3-article laws, or anti-masquerading laws they were called, and people also termed them walking while trans. The 3-article law was, for example, I'm a biological female. If I had on more than 3 articles of clothing that belonged to men, then I could be arrested for impersonating a man. This was primarily used against transgender women. So a biological male that is a transgender woman or is a woman, if they were wearing women's clothing, they would be picked up for soliciting, they're prostituting, and they would also be picked up for impersonating a woman. That's called the 3-article law. And until very recently, that law was on the books in several states, and until the 1970s. So transgender women got picked up all the time for impersonating a woman. And also in the book, Ain't I a Woman by Sojourner Truth, she talks about blackness being associated with manness, and white womanhood was prioritized. So white, benevolent white women that were coming in, thinking they're coming into a system to try to talk to Black and indigenous communities to teach them about what a real woman is and how a real woman behaves and what a real woman looks like. And again, all caught up in that is also race and ethnicity. So if you were darker skinned, maybe you were a larger person, you were seen as more manly than someone, again, that was white and also, in removing homosexuality from the DSM in 1973, the American Psychiatric Association conceded that they had pathologized a normal variation in human character, going so far as to say that they would be the equivalent to pathologicalizing vegetarians or evangelical Christians or anyone that they considered was different from the norm. And they admitted that in the DSMs, calling people of trans experience basically insane or nuts or some sort of other unwelcome term, this was something that they did intentionally. By the APA's own admission, it has been used as a tool of discrimination in the private sector and in the civil service, military, immigration, naturalization, social services, the healthcare, adoption, and so on. And we see these rules enact today, even though those. Good. Okay. Even though we no longer use the DSM, we no longer use DSM in categorizing gender dysphoria as some sort of deviant or pathological problem. So gender binary has been talked about particularly by women and how it serves to exert control. And with this theme at USCHA this year on a love letter to Black women, I thought I would put this up that Shirley Chisholm said many years ago. The emotional, sexual, and psychological stereotyping of females begin when the doctor says it's a girl. This is something that women talk about traditionally, and again, in keeping with the theme of this conference, I wanted to bring this up, that this is something that Shirley Chisholm noted and made comments on during her career. So why the gender binary exists again? The gender binary exists to create division and conflict, not to celebrate creativity and diversity. So the inclusion of gender and sexuality. So I wanted to bring this up as a reminder that the gender binary has not always been a thing. The gender binary is a much more recent invention. It's a much more recent tool, again, used to cause divisiveness within our community, within our cultures. And there was no consistent definition, and there's still, in my opinion, there's no real consistent definition of what a man is and what a woman is. So many cultures throughout this world, throughout time, has celebrated people that we would call gender fluid or gender queer. And particularly in the indigenous population or indigenous culture, we had people that were termed as two spirits, people familiar with two spirits, yes? And these people were celebrated within their communities, right? They were celebrated within their tribes, they were celebrated within their culture, because these people were seen as leaders and valuable to their community. So with the two-spirit people, they actually classified themselves as having four genders. You were masculine, 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 female, feminine, 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 female, or masculine, feminine, feminine, masculine. And again, these people were celebrated, and they could be whatever they needed to be in their community, in their tribe at that moment. And that was something celebrated. And again, other cultures had the same people within their, are we good? Many other cultures had the same people within their cultures as well and within their communities. So there were words for transness, but there were no real words for cisness. So cisgender and cisness, again, is relatively new term that was not used to describe people who were, who we would now call as genderqueer within their communities. Maintaining a binary system, again, creates some having power over others, polarizing binary and non-binary people, pitting cis, trans against one another, genderqueer against cis and trans and one another. And so the systems created by primarily white Western civilizers, what we call the colonizers, they created the sense of binary, the sense of a man is, we can tell you what a man is. There's a strict definition of what a man is and what a woman is. And so that sort of started this binary culture that happened not on its own within our communities, but definitely started by people who were coming into these communities telling people, you're not really acting like a man. Let us show you what a man is, how a man behaves. The same thing with women. Let me show you how women dress, how women behave, and how they should be behaving within their culture and within their society. So this is what started and caused this whole thing that we deal with now in terms of trans and cisness. You get over into the early 1900s, and again, throughout our culture, throughout our history, we've had people that were gender fluid in our cultures and celebrated. And then when you get into the early 1900s, there becomes this more of an issue in defining what cis and transgender is. So the invention of gender and sexuality, again, started with white Western civilization coming into communities telling them how they should behave. There's a pioneer who was actually one of the people very early on who encouraged people who had gender dysphoria to get gender reassignment surgery if that's something that they felt would make them complete and live in their truth. So Harry Benjamin, who was the founder of the Harry Benjamin Institute, which we now know as WPATH, was a straight white man who was an advocate for trans individuals, also encouraged the first person to actually go to another country that was from the United States to get gender reassignment surgery. Her name is Christine Jorgensen. I'll talk a little bit about her in a second. And in the context of being the founder of the Harry Benjamin Institute, and in the context of actually trying to advocate for transgender people, he also created a problem, right? His board members and what we now know as WPATH, that was called the Harry Benjamin Institute, was all made of white men and white older men. So we had this paternalistic group of people, once again, exerting what they thought a person of trans experience should be, what they may want, how they should behave. So as we go on into the 1940s and 50s, this again was a huge issue. Christine Jorgensen, which I'll show in a minute. Christine Jorgensen actually was a woman, a United States citizen who went to another country, had gender reassignment surgery, and was known throughout the world. She came back to this country basically a celebrity, talking to people about what being a woman is, how she felt as a woman, and being asked, did she feel any different being after she had this surgery, and if she felt more like a woman in that context. As we move forward, the problem that we've noticed in the later 1950s and moving forward was the ability for people who really needed gender affirming surgery to get it. And so this woman that I have on here, Denny Mellon, who was she is a military, she's a veteran, she was a military, okay. So this woman, Denny Mellon, she actually sued Medicare. So for people who think that, oh, somehow or another that the healthcare system just decided, oh, doing gender affirming surgery is something we should do, it's a good thing. That is not how it happened. The healthcare system doesn't work like that. It never does the right thing on its own. It's something that we all advocate and push for. And anyway, she sued Medicare for the right to have gender affirming surgery and won. And again, she was a veteran. She was in the military, sued Medicare and won her right to have gender affirming surgery. And that was in 2012, 2010, 2012. And moving forward, that forced Medicare, Medicaid, and other insurance companies to provide coverage for people that needed gender affirming surgery. And very rarely will you hear me say wanted. It's a medically necessary and it's surgically necessary care. And so that sort of started the push and also allowed many people moving forward to get gender affirming surgery that needed this type of health care and have it covered by the insurance companies. And again, which I mentioned a little bit earlier in the founder syndrome, again, Dr. Benjamin and the board and other white men, again, had this, had their concept of what transgender is and how transgender individuals should receive care, but the people who were really living that truth and in that experience did not have a seat at the table. And so just in the timeline, I'm going to skip to Christine Jorgensen. Again, she's probably the most famous person nobody's ever heard of, who actually left the United States to get gender reassignment surgeries, what they referred to it at the time, came back to the United States and had all of this glory and all of this attention for now being a woman and having conversations and being on talk shows to talk to people about what being a woman is. And as we move forward, remember at this point, insurance companies, the healthcare system did not welcome transgender care, did not welcome individuals who required surgery to live in their truth and live in the identity that they chose to live in, that they were needed to live in. So moving forward, if people are familiar with the Cooper Donut riots, that was actually before Stonewall. And this was in LA back in the like 1959, 1960, again, before Stonewall. And rioters were arrested in Los Angeles, transgender women, lesbian women, drag queens, gay men, it was an uprising again to try to force the system to recognize people who were queer, genderqueer, and who wanted to live in their truth and will live as full citizens like everybody else. And then you move into the 1960s where the Compton cafeteria riots occurred, and that was in 1966. Transgender women and members of the Tenderloin District in San Francisco were arrested, had an uprising, again, just for the right to live in their truth, just for the right to be like everybody else and live, again, and live in their truth like everyone else. And then these riots or uprisings occurred before Stonewall in 1969. There's a short video here. Anybody familiar with Equal at all? HBO special. This is a 4-part series that's Equal, and it's really very, very powerful. And it actually talks about transgender people, genderqueer people over decades back when it's still not safe to be genderqueer in this society, but when it really wasn't safe, you could be arrested, again, for the 3-article rule. This miniseries talks about that in real detail, so I would encourage everyone to watch this. It's called Equal, and it was on HBO Max.
We arrested around 3,000 homosexuals.
The police department knows they're sex deviants.
In 1952, admitting to being gay could get you 15 years to life. Cops would contact our employers, publish our names and addresses in the paper.
We were going to lose our jobs, lose our homes.
We were tired of being victims.
I declared under oath
That I was homosexual. I wasn't ashamed of it.
For the first time, we went in saying we had the right to be who we are.
We should be standing up on our hind legs and demanding our full equality.
We are all fed up.
You can be proud of being gay. You can be proud of being yourself. That in itself was radical.
Are you a man or a woman?
Well, dear, first one has to determine what is a man and what is a woman.
Sick and tired of being shut down.
People who are just coming into their own in the world must be as dramatic about it as they possibly can.
Time to take what we deserve now.
We can't just let ourselves be attacked, pushed around again and again. Start shoving back.
You can't force us into your boxes anymore. We are not going.
What do you say?
So being a transgender person is not a risk factor. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation and frame it this way is because I take care of young people. And every now and then one of my young trans kids will say something to me that really takes me back and helps me to realize that I really need to learn more and do more to help my kids, not just providing hormones for them, but understand more of what they're living through and what they're going through. And I have these kids that have said a couple things to me. One is, I'm taking care of this young trans girl, and she says, she's beautiful, she's doing great, life is good. And then she says, okay, when am I going to get it? And I was looking at her, and I was like, come again? Just when am I going to get it? When are you going to get what? When am I going to get HIV? I said, well, who told you? Were you talking about HIV? Why are we talking about HIV? Like, we're here for your medical care right now. And she's like, because I'm a transgender girl, I'm going to get it. And in that moment, I thought, okay, we are, as a society and as a healthcare system, is doing something wrong. We have individuals of trans experience saying, particularly transgender women of color, if you're a transgender woman, you're going to get HIV, but you're not going to get HIV because you're a transgender woman. There are other factors that make you more at risk. And so that's sort of why I wanted to have this conversation so we could reframe the way we talk about this. And the other thing that this young person let me realize, helped me realize, and even though, everybody knows the world is really, 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 really big, but everybody is connected through social media. And so these kids don't live in a bubble no matter where they live. And the next thing, I have young kids saying to me is, well, I don't know how long I'm going to live anyway, because girls like me don't live that long. Girls like me, they get killed in their 30s. Girls that like me, they die before they're 30. So, it's going to happen to me too. And it makes me really sad, and it's painful for me to hear young people speak that way, because that's not inevitable. And again, I wanted to take the onus off of them as a transgender individual, and it's actually on society. So I want to reframe how we talk about this and not talk about transgender people, particularly transgender women, as being a risk factor because you are a trans person. That is not the case. It's what society has done. It's what the healthcare system does to perpetuate the binary system and to oppress people that are genderqueer and transgender experience. So talking about that, again, these young people do not live in a bubble, and they understand violence against transgender, particularly transgender women of color. And if we look at every town for gun safety, the number of trans people murdered in the U.S. nearly doubled between 2017 and 2021. And again, it doesn't make the front page. People rarely even talk about it. The number of transgender women, particularly black women who are murdered on the regular. Of the total victims that were murdered, 73% were killed with a gun. Every town's gender homicide tracker found a 93% increase in tracked homicides of trans and gender nonconforming people in the United States and Puerto Rico over the last 4 years. In 2021, 56 people were killed compared to 29 reported deaths in 2017. And I always say this with a caveat because I think we understand those deaths are underreported from people, particularly transgender women. They're either not recognized by their gender identity, they're referred to by their legal name, or they're not reported at all. So these murders actually that happen against transgender women specifically actually go unreported. So I would say that number is easily doubled or tripled what's being reported. While only 13% of the transgender community is estimated to be black, according to UCLA's School of Law Williams Institute, black trans women accounted for nearly 3/4 of the known victims. In 2019, the AMA recognized an epidemic of violence against the transgender community, who are over 2.5 times more likely than cisgender people to experience violence. And Remembrance Reports honors 47 trans people that were lost to violence last November. And so I put this in a different form to actually take a look at this over the years and to actually see what's being reported and what's happening against transgender people. So if we look at BIPOC transgender individuals, 2020, 2021, 2022, and so far what I have in 2023, the blue represents transgender and non-binary people. The orange represents people, Black and Indigenous people of color, and then the gray you see is firearms. And if you look, 2021 by far was the worst year in terms of violence and murder committed against transgender people, also against Black and Indigenous people of color. And then if you look at the firearms, every year, more people, particularly again transgender women, Black transgender women, are killed at the hand of guns. And I'm not even going to get into the gun culture in this, because then I'll get way off base. Getting into the gun culture and how everybody feels like they have to have a gun, but they're perpetrating violence against people who, again, are more oppressed in this society. That includes people that have mental illness, that includes people that are genderqueer, it includes people who are gay, it includes the whole gambit of people who are considered as marginalized people in our community. So firearms, by far the most common cause of death in transgender women and transgender women of color, and 2021 was the worst year. But again, so far as of May, the statistics I could get only went up to May of 2023. There were 14 reported transgender women that had been murdered. And I can't even keep up with this anymore. I used to yearly do this chart you see there that shows anti-trans bill trackers. If you go to translegislation.com, they track all the anti-trans bills throughout the country. And the last that I updated this a few days ago, they're tracking 31 national anti-trans bills in the United States. Everybody knows it's like an epidemic of transgender legislation across the country. In 2023, 83 anti-trans bills have already passed out of 566 that were proposed across the country. And a few months ago when I did this talk, it was 490 something bills that have been proposed. Now we're at 566 bills proposed across the country. Of those, again, 83 have been signed into law. There are some that have been vetoed. There are some that are going before the courts as unconstitutional. At this current time, there are 358 active and 125 trans bills that have failed. And to put that in perspective, in 2022, we had 26 bills passed out of 174 bills that were proposed. That was just in 2022. So this sweep across the country of transgender legislation, the rhetoric around people of trans experience is only worsening violence against this group of people. And so what's the purpose of it? Like my thing is like, why do you care? Like, why do you care about how another person lives their life? Or better yet, why do you care what families want to do with their children? They're their children. Why do you care? And why do you care where I'm doing my job? And why do you want to legislate how I'm doing my job? Why are you in my lane where I know how to provide this care? And I know families where this care is definitely needed for these kids. Why do you care? And we've talked about that, right? They want to keep this binary system. This binary system pits people against one another. It also encourages misogyny. There's an intersection, of course, between anti-LGBTQIA legislation, particularly transgender legislation, and ethnicity and race. And we know that white supremacy is behind a lot of this anti-trans legislation. Again, transphobia, misogyny, and again, the definition, people, trying to make sure that their definition of what maleness or man is, or what female or being a woman is maintained in this society. And I'm just really happy to know that young people that I take care of, they're just not having it. They're continuing to live in their truth, knowing that they come up against violence and, verbal abuse and all sorts of other things that are just really unnecessary. And these anti-trans bills legally codify gender norms, which we talked about, that are economically and reproductively generative for the nation and for the state. And so why transgender youth are at risk? Again, transgender youth are not at risk for HIV, for violence, for other STIs because they're transgender youth. Again, it's society, it's this hateful rhetoric, it's anti-trans legislation, it's transphobia, it's all of these other things that society has put on this group of people, as particularly these young group of kids where now you can't even get transgender care if you're a young person in many states. There are these articles, I put this in here, this was provided by the Washington Examiner. It really kind of made me angry. In this article, they publicized this article that thousands of U.S. children underwent gender transition. And they didn't define what gender transition is. Gender transition does not mean hormones for everyone. There can be social transition. A lot of kids socially transition and never go beyond that. But in this article, they made it appear as though families, providers, every kid that comes in, hey, you want hormones? You got it. You want to be a different gender? You got it. And they made it sound as though there's this onslaught of kids who are being basically abused by the healthcare system and their families, and that somehow or another those of us that provide this care have secondary financial gain. I don't know where that came from. But this is the stories that they print. These are things that they print that also causes this type of anti-trans legislation against receiving gender-affirming care. And there are states in this article that I also have in here for you to look to read when you get the opportunity. It's a good article, and it talks about the states that have banned transgender hormone and surgeries for kids. And there are 29 states at this point who have banned transgender hormones, surgeries, and any type of care actually for kids, which is cruel and inhumane. And what they don't understand, and many of us advocates are trying to talk with them about, is when you deny kids this medically necessary treatment, suicide rates go up, harming themselves go up, violence against these kids go up. And so again, society, the politics, the healthcare system is not really doing what it should be doing to celebrate diversity and celebrate inclusiveness. So this is a TED Talk from this young trans girl who actually tells her story about how she got to be who she is. And she actually talks about, when she decided to, at 14, she decided to come out to her family, and her voice is very powerful. I'm really sad we can't hear it. She talks about at 14 how she came out to her family, how she came out to her parents, and after she came out, she got abused at the hands of her family. She was abused at the hands of other relatives. She was abused at the hands of other people. And so she got away from that abusive situation, and she went to this prestigious prep school. And she talks about how because she couldn't afford and she didn't have wigs or hair, she used T-shirts. And any of us know when we were kids, when we used to dress up, put T-shirts on your head so you had hair. Anybody else did that? Yeah, I did. Okay. I did that too. It was fun. My brother did that too. We all did that. We just had this hair, these T-shirts. So she talked about doing that and actually going to school that way because she couldn't afford to do anything with her hair. This particular school she was in, a teacher, her house burned down. And the school was taking up a collection for this teacher. And this young lady had $10. And she donated $10, her last $10, for this woman because she herself knew what it was like to be homeless. She left her home because she couldn't live in her identity without being abused. So she gave the teacher her $10. The teacher found out it was her. They gave her the money. And this is how, it all comes back to you. Little did she know that the teacher also was a hairstylist. And so she told her, she thanked her for helping her. And this young lady said, I know what it's like to be homeless. I know what it's like to not have anything. I've been there, done that. So I gave you $10 to help you get something. And in return, this teacher, who is also a hairstylist, said, you know what? We're going to get rid of the T-shirt. We're going to get rid of it. And she said, yeah, because I'm tired of kind of like the white T-shirts and the black T-shirts. I'm ready for some hair. So she's like, we're going to let you know you can come get your hair done, get your wigs, and I'm going to take care of you because you looked after me. So she tells this powerful story about her transition and how she came to be who she is. She's a really remarkable young lady. And again, this is a TED Talk.
An upscale home in New York City's Queens neighborhood had all the marks of wealth, prestige, and affluence. The boy was just 18 months old when the foster care system placed him in a home where the arms of loving parents, private schools, and weekends at the shore should have awaited him. Instead, the boy came face to face with unspeakable acts of abuse, shaming, slapping, neglect, and more. One fateful day at the age of 14, he disclosed to his parents he was not like the other boys. He was transgender. Physical violence, stabbing, homelessness followed. He became one more nameless throwaway, one more statistic to add to the growing 2.5 million homeless LGBTQ youth in America, being reduced to nothing. No family, no resources, no access. Today I'm going to teach you how pain is the key to liberation. At age 14, undergoing gender transition as a freshman in a prestigious prep school, while secretly homeless, was not faint for the heart. I didn't have the $1 million Kardashian glam team that Caitlyn Jenner has today. I was alone. I didn't have much, but what I had was my truth. The very truth that I was ridiculed and physically attacked for. When I started my journey, I would wear t-shirts on my head to represent my hair because I couldn't afford expensive wigs. And because that was my truth, the guys and girls in school not only ridiculed, but would physically attack me. One day I went to school and I found out that my teacher, Ms. Peterson, had lost her home due to a fire, and she was living out of her hair salon in Mount Vernon, New York. When I found out that they were doing a fundraiser for her, I donated my last $10 that I had because I understood exactly what not having a home felt like. When word got back to Ms. Peterson that I was the only student in the school to donate to her fundraiser, she said, "Hey, Dee, I just really want to thank you so much for what you did for me." I said, "Mama P, let's just say I know all too well what not having a home feels like." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I don't have family. I don't got nobody right now. But I choose to come to school every single day in the hope that I will build a home again, the home that I didn't have growing up as a youth." She said, "Well, for starters, I want you to know you're not alone. And from this moment on, you can come by my hair salon whenever you want to get your hair done. So we can start off by taking the t-shirts off your head." I said, "Well, that's amazing," because I was tired of the black and the white Hanes t-shirts. And she said, "Don't worry. Pain is not something that's equated to experience. It's the feeling we all have the right to feel." I recognize this moment in my life as a transformative moment because my pain was gender transition. Her pain was losing a home. After graduating high school, I felt like, "Daniela, you've arrived. The pain, the trauma is over." But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I went on to college in Rochester, New York, where I met a group of friends. And one of my friends said, "I'm going to be homeless during winter recess. The RA can't help me anymore, and I don't know what to do." I said, "Well, I could help out. I don't have much back home myself, but I have friends and have a community that'll open their doors for at least one night max, and that's how we'll get through the winter recess." We experienced the two R's that no one wants to experience. She experienced robbery, and I experienced rape. At that moment in my life, I felt so empty, the kind of emptiness that I'm sure many of us have felt when we begin to question and say, "Why me? What did I do to deserve this? I'm a great person. I do everything right. I didn't do anything wrong, but why me?" That was the questions that I was living in, the very pain and the very trauma that left me empty. After feeling so empty, I could no longer pursue my college education. I returned back to New York City. And in this pivotal moment of pain, I knew I had to redefine my role, because I was living in the very pain that many people can no longer live in, and they make the choice to take their life. For me, it wasn't hard to make that decision to say, do I want to live or do I want to die? But I understood the need of my existence, because I said, there is no way that a woman like yourself can exist in a world that says she is not perfect and you should be a he. I live in a world that tells me when I walk through the doors of many places, you don't see my personality, you see my complexion. And so I turned to my friend and I said, listen, we can't keep doing survival sex work. One of us got to get out of this. I applied to an internship program in New York City, and shortly after I got accepted. Me and my friend, in a transformative moment, passed by a newsstand and I said, hey girl, she's very pretty. We should read this article. I mean, every beautiful girl always have a great story. He was like, girl, I gotta go home. I can't wait around to read a beautiful girl's story. But see, it was something special about that girl, because that girl reflected my identity, something I didn't have growing up, and that was Janet Mock, New York Times best-selling author. When I reached out to Janet in 2010 in an impassionate email, I reached out not asking for the fame, for the glam, but for the very tools that I lack and the very tools that can become resources for my community. After reaching out to Janet, she connected me with community leaders that liberated me. They liberated me in a way that helped me realize either I was going to take my trauma and violence and turn it into freedom and success, or I was going to end up committing suicide. A year later, the unimaginable happened. I was a part of the Emmy Award-winning documentary, Laverne Cox Presents the T-Word. I also traveled the globe advocating for youth who's living not only in marginalization, but in the very truth I identified with, homelessness. No resource, no family, no acceptance. I then went on and worked with a woman by the name of Lord's Ashley Hunter. And we built a coalition that is now servicing youth all across this country. And so I know now the question is, okay, there's no way you can go from being in foster care, homeless, and all of a sudden you just get on TV. So it's the very question many people ask me, how did you do it? How could that pain have liberated you? I learned that in life, all you have is choices. Many of us wake up and we make the most amazing choices we can. And it takes us to the very places we dreamed of or the unimaginable places. And that's the pain that I no longer wanted to live in, but the freedom I knew I had to. So I do what I like to call not just affirmations, but self-acceptance. The act of saying, I have to live in a world where people say I'm wrong. So I'm going to accept the very things that people don't about me. And that's what I challenge you to do, to accept everything that people don't. Because if you accept and internalize the things that people don't accept about you, you will not only live in the pain, you will not only live in the trauma, but you'll suppress the very pain that can become your success. And so, I know, it sounds like, oh, you're lucky. You're on TED. But in 2015, in the month of August, 3 transgender women of color were reported murdered in one day. Many reports come in every single month. 41% of my community have attempted suicide. The ever-growing number of 2.5 million homeless youth. And the the harsh reality it must be to walk out saying, I'm going to the doctor, and then you're dead. So am I the lucky one, or am I the chosen one? That's the question I will never know the answer to. But what I do know is I'm standing here in my truth, and I'm standing here in my pain. But the difference between my pain 4 years ago and my pain now is that my pain has liberated me. It has liberated me in a way that I hope to liberate you here today. So I ask that you join the revolution of loving and accepting someone different, because in the eyes of someone else, you are different to them. And different is the new frontier.
So one of the things that I wanted to look at in my population, I have a large population of transgender adolescents. About 66% of my transgender adolescents are transgender youth of color. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about what we've done in our community to look at transgender adolescents of color and HIV. And that there are unique challenges in preventing new infections in this group, because remember, these kids impact me in a whole different way. When they say things to me, I listen and I take it to heart, and I needed to find out, why do my kids think that they're gonna get HIV? Like, why is this a thing? Why do you think that this is inevitable? And also, we provide PrEP. So why are we having this conversation when you know you can get PrEP? So this is the background for a study that we did. HIV estimated prevalence is 9.2% for all transgender persons nationally, with a significantly higher prevalence for transgender women at 14.1%. There's a paucity of published data that exists defining the risk of HIV in transgender or non-binary youth of color. So recent CDC data reported the urgent need for more HIV prevention and treatment in this demographic. TGMB youth of color have numerous risk factors for HIV. Them being transgender is not one of them. Unstable housing, under or uninsured, unemployment, and substance use disorder puts them at a higher risk for being exposed to HIV. So we assess these key social determinants in this particular group of young people in the Bronx to see why they did not prioritize their sexual health and HIV prevention, make it a priority in their lives. So just the upshot of the study is we looked at 101 sexually active transgender and non-binary youth, and what I found that was only 24% of our kids were actually initiating PrEP. And that, to me, it was heartbreaking, especially since we provide this care, and it really made me sad that somehow or another we weren't doing something right to reach this population. We also found that in this group of kids, out of the 101 kids, 23% are unemployed. Of that 23% that are unemployed, 5 kids initiated PrEP. 11% had unstable housing. 3 of those kids initiated PrEP. Under or uninsured, which is not a huge problem in the state of New York where I work now, everybody's insured practically. 10% were under uninsured. Usually these kids were in unstable living situations. 3 of them initiated PrEP. The surprise for me was the kids that were using some sort of substances to just make it through the day. Marijuana really wasn't so much included in that. I don't really consider that a substance use disorder. These were kids who were using other drugs and drinking alcohol if they were underage. That was considered in the substance use. And out of that, 40% of my kids that use some sort of drug, other than marijuana, because I don't consider that a substance use disorder, 10 of them initiated PrEP. If they had more than one of the above, which was 2/3 of the kids, only 3 of them initiated PrEP. And what I found from the kids that were using substances, other than marijuana, they really recognized that them using the substances, that they weren't always in control of the decisions that they were making, and they actually understood that they needed to be on PrEP. So they were taking a little bit more risks with their decision making, but they understood the risks that they were taking, and they were more likely to initiate PrEP, which I found really fascinating and very mature way to look at prioritizing your sexual health care. We also found that in this clinic that I run, the Adolescent and Youth Sexual Health Clinic, we offer gender-affirming care, comprehensive gender-affirming care for pediatric patients on up. And we found that gender-affirming care is associated with access and willingness for STI testing, counseling, to inform these young people of their individual risks for HIV and ways that we can keep them safe. And these social determinants of health specifically, I call them the 4 U's. We commonly see them in our TGMB kids, and that they negatively impacted their ability to prioritize their sexual health care and HIV prevention. They actually prioritizing their sexual health care and actually preventing HIV was not a priority to them if they had one or more of these U's in these social determinants of health. So what we're doing now and what we've done is restructured our program a little bit to do a better job of assessing young people and their risk for HIV exposure. So we have a tool that we call Artista. Give us a little flavor, a little Artista, we're in the Bronx. And this is assessing risk in transgender individuals that are sexually active. So not everybody is in this particular cohort, particularly if they're sexually active and they're at risk for exposure. We have them in this particular group. And for what you can see here, we've changed our questionnaire intake, the way we talk to young people about their risk. We ask them all kinds of questions and we also let them know that the questions that we're asking them is so that we can understand how to best keep them safe and how to best protect them. And so in this questionnaire, it also gives them the opportunity to tell us how they want to be identified, what pronouns they want to use. And a lot of my kids, again, about a third of my kids, they're gender fluid. Sometimes they're he, him, sometimes they're they, them. We recognize that and we respect them and use that. So we also make sure that that's part of their assessment. We also ask them about partners, partner violence. Are they involved with anyone who's living with HIV? Are they, do they understand their risk? Have they had hepatitis C and other things that put them at risk for HIV exposure? So we're hoping in doing this assessment and better having an idea of better how to protect and talk to young people, particularly about prioritizing their sexual health, that we can actually get them to prioritize that and increase PrEP uptake in this particular group of young people. So concrete steps that we can do, again, I take care of young people, so I really focus on them and talk to them about depression. We have therapists. We were fortunate enough to find a genderqueer therapist. He is absolutely amazing. The kids love him. They need to see somebody that they can relate to and that speaks in the language that they respond to and they understand. So we provide that for our kids. Also, there's information by the Trevor Project for people who are familiar with the Trevor Project. They found that having pronouns respected by most people cuts attempted suicide rates by half. Having access to gender-affirming clothing lowered rates of attempting suicide. And again, for people that don't understand, gender-affirming care does not always mean hormones. And I have a lot of kids that get gender-affirming care that are not on hormones. That's not a decision that they're ready to make, and they don't necessarily want them. And having at least one LGBTQ affirming space where they felt safe and comfortable had a 35% reduction in suicide attempts, and having at least one accepting adult can reduce the risk of a suicide attempt among LGBTQ young people by 40%. And again, concrete steps are supporting non-binary kids as well, non-binary mental health, empower patients by discussing their pronouns and how important it is to them. I have some kids that are in gender-affirming care, they don't care about the pronouns. I said, do you have pronouns? They're like, I don't really care. I don't care what you call me. Do you have a preferred name? No, I don't really care. You can call me this name. This is the name I have now. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, once they feel comfortable and they're living a little bit more in their truth, they'll say, well, I'm they, them. Okay, then you're they, them. We'll call you they, them until you decide otherwise. So having that acceptance and being able to support these kids who are very gender fluid is extremely important. That's been hard for me as well, because some of these kids, I get them and they're one way, and then 2 or 3 months later, they're deciding, that they want to live in a different identity. So we do a good job trying to make sure that we keep up with the kids, but they're really teaching us a lot about how they want to be addressed in this society, and that they're really not having this binary system. I've got to be, if I'm identifying as a trans woman, that I have to look a certain way, or if I'm identifying as a trans man, I have to look this way. I have trans boys that come in with their nails painted, makeup looking better than mine would ever look. and they identify as he, him. So I think that's a good thing, and that's a great way for our kids to push us to really recognize them and appreciate them for who they are. Anybody familiar with this story, Southern Comfort? It's something else I really recommend people to watch. It's really good. So this is a trans man, and this trans man had still had a uterus, ovaries, and this trans man had gotten cancer. I think it was ovarian or uterine. I can't really remember, but he had gotten cancer, and because he was a trans man, the healthcare system refused to treat him. They refused to give him the necessary medical care that you would give anybody else that had a uterus and ovaries and developed cancer. And so they basically let him die. And in this Southern Comfort, which again, his voice is very powerful in telling this story, that the first thing he starts off by saying is, I don't know why they did what they done. And he can't understand, which when you look at this, you can't understand it either, why the healthcare system didn't provide him the necessary care, because he is a trans man, identified as a man, but still had a uterus and ovaries. And the healthcare system refused to treat him, and he died. So if you get an opportunity to, to look at Southern Comfort, I would recommend that you do it. It's really good.
It's Easter morning, and it's sunrise. And I wish I could understand why they did what they did, why they had to feel that way. And I know in a way they've contributed to my dying here. But I can't hate them. I don't hate them. I feel sorry for them. I can't say I actually forgive them for what they've done. I think that's more between them and God. But I don't hate them. I guess what makes me most sad is that they probably feel like they did the right thing.
Doing this thing. The takeaway points I would like for us to leave here with today is that data may underestimate trauma experiences among TGNB adolescents, but the message is clear that transgender non-binary adolescents are more likely to report psychological, physical, and sexual abuse than their cisgender peers. There's the reference for that information. And reframe the discussion about risk for HIV and STIs among TGNB youth and adults, and that we don't talk about them as because they're transgender or non-binary people, that automatically puts you at risk. That is not the point. And so I would like for us to rephrase the way we talk about that and understand the social determinants of health that are specific to transgender non-binary youth, unstable housing, unemployment, substance use disorder, and under or uninsured that are critical in assessing these kids and addressing those social determinants to allow them to prioritize their sexual health. And that a binary society and culture serves to create division and conflict, not to celebrate creativity and diversity. And then I like this little cartoon. I wonder why trans people have it so hard. Because society treats us like shh. Maybe it's developmental. Maybe the brain is dephased from the body and it makes them sad. Or maybe it's because society treats us like shit. These are additional resources that I encourage people to utilize for referrals or for yourselves if anybody is doing this care and want to also refer people. And then again, these are it's in the presentation, these other resources and hotlines and so on, you can go. And this is my information. I appreciate your attention and your patience with this presentation this morning. Thank you.